Vying for the top job is former Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. She is with me now. Hi, Ms. Freeland. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
It is really good to be with you, Vashi, on a really serious day for Canada and Canadians. You know, the U.S. president has taken action which is unjustified. It's illegal. It's a betrayal of the deep and close and productive relationship between our countries for centuries. This is economic warfare. I'm grateful to you for your work covering it, and I'm grateful to Canadians. I think that the Americans are going to get a big surprise when they see how strong and united our country is. We're not going to take it, and I'm proud to see the response across the whole country already.
And I do want to ask you a bit more about that response, but I also wanted to get your insights because you were such a part of the first time around with Donald Trump. And I know I don't have to tell you, he spoke at the time about getting a fairer deal for Americans. This time around, he's trying to substantiate what he's doing through the border, though we know that the facts don't bear that out. What do you think this is about for Donald Trump?
Thank you for coming back to the facts. And the fact is the pretexts we are hearing from the U.S. administration are utterly ludicrous. Canada is an outstanding partner for the U.S. We provide them with so much security along 5,500 kilometers of our border. They are lucky to have us as their friend and ally and neighbor, and they are treating us atrociously. And it is so important for us right now to be strong and smart and united. It is very important for us to make clear to them that if they hit us, we will hit back. That is the only language that this administration understands. And it's also important for us to make clear to the rest of America that this will come at a cost. That really needs to be our focus right now, to make clear to Americans that in doing this, they are hurting themselves, that we will increase the pain, and that they don't need to do this. You know, this is a solution looking for a problem. There is no problem between Canada and the United States. It is utterly self-mutilating for the Americans to do this. I think they underestimate Canada. I think they do not recognize how strong we are, how much we love our country. And I know that we are already seeing, and we're going to see even more in the coming days, such a wave of Canadian patriotism. We love Canada. We are committed to fighting for Canada. And that, Vashi, is why I'm running to be leader of the Liberal Party and the next Prime Minister of Canada, because I know how to fight for Canada, and I know that together we're going to win.
And I want to ask in that vein, if you do become Prime Minister, when you just talked about increasing pain, should that be necessary, how far beyond what was laid out last night as an initial response would you be prepared to go?
So let me just start by saying this is a moment for a true Team Canada approach. It is not a moment for any kind of infighting inside the Canadian tent. I fully support what the government is doing, and I think today all Canadians need to do that. And I have been so proud and so delighted to see the strong action that we're seeing premiers take from coast to coast to coast. That is a great thing. And I also really want to encourage every single individual Canadian. Now is the time to wear your maple leaf with pride. Now is the time for each one of us to think, how can I stand up for my country? I'm encouraging us all to buy Canadian and boycott America. That's one way that we can help Canada and that we can get to a good solution sooner.
There is certainly a unified front on most of what the government has done so far. I think it's the prospect of what might come next, that increased pain, as you put it, that has certainly led to some division, particularly between different regions and in different premiers. And to be more specific, what I mean is the prospect of blocking energy exports to the U.S., which will only see quote unquote, see a 10% tariff versus the 25% tariff on the rest of Canadian goods, or adding an export tax. To be clear, I would like to ask you unequivocally, if you do become Prime Minister, are you willing to do that?
We have to be prepared to use every single tool in the toolbox. We have to recognize this is an existential crisis. It's an existential moment for Canada. My approach will be to be strong, to be smart, and to be united, and to do the work we need to do on the home front to be sure that we have that united coalition with provinces, with business, with labor. And I know how to do it because I've done it before. I did it during the first NAFTA negotiations. I did it during COVID. I know that everyone in Canada loves Canada. I know that everyone in Canada recognizes this is utterly serious, and that we have to, if we are hit, which is what is happening, we have to fight back, and we have to fight back together. That's the Canadian response that I will lead.
Premiers Legault and Danielle Smith are saying that none of that should happen without provincial consent. Would you move ahead without that consent, or do you agree that that is necessary in order to do something like blocking energy exports?
I think the way to move ahead is to be strong, to use all the tools in our toolbox, and I am confident that I can lead a united Canadian response, because that's the way we are strong. And I also want to say one more thing, Vashi, that at the end of the day, we are fighting back not for the sake of it, but we're fighting back to be successful. And so what we really need to think about is, how do we activate Americans? How do we get Americans to understand this is hurting them and for no good reason? And how do we get them to apply pressure on the White House? We're already seeing some positive results. The U.S. steelworkers, who are an important political force in the U.S., have come out and said, this is really a bad idea. This is going to hurt our members. And so we need to be really smart, really surgical, really targeted in our actions. Because the thing is, at the end of the day, this is going to be painful for the Americans. It's going to be painful for American businesses. It's going to be painful for American workers. And they're going to ask themselves, I'm losing my job to have a fight with Canada? Like, why is this happening? And that is the outcome, that is the reaction that we need to drive towards relentlessly. It starts with strength, because we need to make very clear to President Trump that Canada is not a pushover. I know he is going to be astonished by how strong our country is.
And I do, Ms. Freeland, understand that point and take it, but that doesn't directly address what I asked you, which was whether or not you would seek provincial consent. And I'm asking, you know, not sort of in the abstract. You could be Prime Minister in a month and a half. Would you, you know, require, or would you submit to the idea that you need provincial consent before you block the resources of Alberta or Quebec, for example?
And what I'm saying, Vashi, is I am confident, given my track record, given my work with premiers of provinces and territories, that I will be able to build a united Canadian coalition to use all the tools in our toolbox and to fight for Canada. I'm confident I can do that.
But what if you can't? I mean, there's been no indication that all of a sudden Danielle Smith will get on board with everything being on the table. Are you willing to go against the will of provinces?
I was born and raised in Alberta. And I know that Albertans are just as patriotic as Canadians in other provinces. I know that Albertans love Canada. And Vashi, I have utter confidence that as Prime Minister, I would be able to build a national coalition across the country to do what we need to do, to use all the tools in our toolbox, if that's what we have to do, to fight back, to fight for Canada. I know I can do that.
And I would not disagree with the assessment that Albertans love Canada, but their view of what that means might differ from yours. And in particular, I think, and I'm sure the sentiment has been expressed to you as it has to me, there is a feeling among Albertans as to, you know, why should they shoulder the burden of whatever is to come, or the majority of the burden of whatever is to come, when they do not feel like your government has been there for them, closing the door, for example, on pipelines other than TMX, closing the door on exporting more LNG. Like they do not feel, and I mean, you were finance minister for years. You were part of a government that certainly was not talking the way it is now about getting our resources to other markets. Albertans feel like you stood in the way of that happening.
As Finance Minister Vashi, one of the things I am proud of, which I spoke about in budget speeches, was getting the Trans Mountain Pipeline built. That was something I was very personally involved in. That is a project that was good for Alberta, that is good for Canada. And today, when we need access to markets other than the United States for our resources, that project is more important than ever. We should all be proud that we got that pipeline built. Albertans know how hard I worked and how important that project is to me. And I do believe that this is a moment when we as a country have to recognize how great it is that we are richly endowed with natural resources. That is such a good thing. We need those resources today more than ever. We do have to redouble our efforts to get those resources to markets, to diverse markets. Albertans know that that is something I stand for, and that will definitely be part of my conversation with Alberta as Prime Minister.
Okay, I'm going to leave our conversation there. I'm out of time. I appreciate your time today. Thanks a lot, Ms. Freeland.
Thank you very much, Vashi. And I just want to say to Canadians, we can do this. This is a serious moment. Of course it is. But we are a magnificent, strong country. We can fight back. We can defend our national interest. I am so, so proud to be Canadian. And that's why I'm running to be leader of the Liberal Party and your next Prime Minister.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thanks a lot.